Welcome one and all to the video focusing on the function values of quadrantals. Here we will learn about the values of the trig functions for specifically quadrantal angles. Here's the slide reminding you guys about the 6 trig functions. Please don't forget about these. We will use x, y, and r as usual to identify the ratios. Please also don't forget that the denominator should never equal 0 or it will cause the value to be undefined. In case there are some of you that need a reminder on quadrantal angles, here they are. It is when the angle specifically lies either on the x or the y axis. So a 90-degree angle is exactly on the positive y axis, 180 for the negative x axis, 270 degrees for the negative y axis, and 360 for the positive x axis. And you can go beyond 360 or less than 0 and still have it still be on the axis. Now, what makes life a little easier when trying to identify the ratios or the function values for the quadrantal angles is that either x or y will equal 0 if it lies on the x or y axis. So, if we were to establish that the terminal side is on 90-degree angles, which is the blue line right here, we can just pick a point and we'll make our lives easier and just say it's the point 0, 1. Well, x will equal 0, y is equal to 1, and if you use the Pythagorean theorem, r would equal 1. Then, so you would do the same thing for all the other ones. You just have to take into account that if it's on the negative side, you've got to make sure that the value itself is also negative. So let's boil it down specifically on the 90-degree angle. Again, for our convenience, you are allowed to choose any point on the terminal side, and we're going to just make it 1 unit from the origin, which makes the r equal to 1, and now we can go ahead and find the trig ratios for each one. So, sine of 90 degrees would be y over r, which we establish as 1 over 1, which is just equal to 1. Now, nothing out of the ordinary happens until we get to tangent 90 degrees and secant 90 degrees. Because in both situations, you have 1 over 0. And as we said before, any fraction that has 0 in the denominator is undefined. So that would be the result of those 2 trig functions. You can easily go ahead and find the values for all the other quadrantal angles, so 180 degrees, 270 degrees, just by establishing what the values of each one would be. Again, you have to make sure you take into account whether it's positive or negative, based on which part of the axis it is on. However, to make your lives easier, this is a chart that gives you the value, each trig function value for each specific quadrantal angle between 0 to 360. So this would be a good way to establish what the result would be. Say, for example, that the tangent of 90 degrees is undefined, which we did earlier. Now, if we were to say what would be another trig function that's also undefined, you could say secant of 270 degrees. So that would be right there. The reason why this chart is allowed to be formed is because we want to be straightforward and consistent as possible, and quadrantal angles are pretty straightforward, so therefore these results should never change. I also have a slide explaining the different conditions that will need to be met in order to determine which trig functions are undefined depending on which quadrantal angle you're on. So if it's on the y-axis, then tangent and secant are undefined, and if it's the x-axis, then cotangent and cosecant are undefined. And that is the end to this lesson.